What's going on, everybody? It's Ted again here with the countdowntothegeeks.com. You know the gentleman to my left, David, and we have a very special interview for you guys. We are celebrating Comic-Con 2025, and this is our first interview for Comic-Con week. It is the entire panel of world builders, visual effects artists, who all turned writers. It is the Visual Effects Meet Speculative Fiction panel, which you can catch this Thursday from 1:30 to 2:30 in room 29 CD at the San Diego Convention Center. Joining us, the entire panel, Alan Chan, Garrett Broussard, Scott Kilburn, Wilson Kincaid, and Jim Hillin. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, everybody.
Well, let's go ahead and get into it. I know that we've been talking a little bit beforehand. A few of you gentlemen are attending San Diego for the first time. We have Scott here, who's like an OG vet. Tell us about how this all came together, putting this panel together. When did you actually realize and understand that you were onto something here, that there is a sort of a handful of gentlemen or just visual effects artists in the industry who have turned to writing their own novels here?
You got to start with that guy.
Guilty as charged. Well, actually, let's see. Wilson and I at WonderCon back in March, we were talking about, we should do a panel or do something. I said, wait a minute. What about, we do visual effects. Aren't there other visual effects artists and supervisors and such who also write? And we put our heads together and said, yeah, I think we could pull together a bunch of people. And so we reached out. And I've known Jimbo for, I don't know.
I don't even remember where we met, but it was on a job somewhere.
Yeah, it was like last century sometime.
Yeah, exactly.
Back when, we were using, charcoal and stone to make digital images or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think Alan and I go back to Sony.
Sony, yeah.
It was at least 10 years ago.
Yeah, I remember Alan. I remember Alan at Sony. I was there in the early 2000s.
Yep.
And, but yeah, I go back to 1984 when I started CGI. So
yeah,
wow.
I was also at Sony ImageWorks. I was like their 13th employee they hired. Yeah, so that was like the early 90s.
Yeah, I was working with Tim over at Metrolight, and he invited me over to.
Yeah. He's the one who wrote me in.
I can't remember what building that was in, but it was over at the Sony lot, one of the three big companies. And they had like 2 conference rooms with the doors open and a bunch of air conditioners, like trying to keep the room cool from all the machines that were in it.
So Anaconda back in Anaconda days or Hollow Man days?
Yeah, I have no idea. This was
previous.
The very, very beginning. Yeah.
Let me see. It was Clint Eastwood and In the Line of Fire.
I love that.
Oh,
wow.
yeah. That's right.
And then it was Schwarzenegger and Last Action Hero. Yeah, Last Action Hero. Yeah. Those were the very first ones that we worked on. So, yeah, that was like 92, 93.
Yeah, about 92, 93, somewhere around there. Yeah.
You guys are older than I am.
I told you that, Alan.
My first experience with Sony was Starship Troopers.
Yes.
I was
that's right. Yeah.
East Coast. Yep.
Yeah, I was there on Starship Troopers. That was my last production there at Sony ImageWorks.
Yeah, I missed you. I think I started on Harry Potter.
Okay.
Lord of the Rings and stuff. So yeah.
I think at that time I was over at I was at Digital Domain. We had just started the company. That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Because I was I did a short stint over at Weta for the Frighteners.
Oh my gosh.
This was Peter Jackson's very first Hollywood production.
Mhm.
He had done local New Zealand movies before, but this was the first time he had actually, gotten the wherewithal, got to Hollywood and said, hey, I want to do a Hollywood feature. Michael J. Fox was in it. And Sony was transferring their digital studio from the lot to a new building. And they said, well, we have about 2 months where we don't have anything. How would you like to go to New Zealand? I said, work with this guy. I forget his name, Peter Jackson.
Peter somebody. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's when I met the entire Weta crew as it was back then. It was in a single building, and all the miniatures were on the ground floor and the digital offices were on the floor above. So I'd walk through the miniature sets with Richard Taylor and everything. I was just like, oh, okay, this is cool.
That's incredible.
Did you know Peter Jackson before you worked for Weta?
No.
Okay.
No, I was Peter. I guess Weta reached out, said, "Hey, we need some experienced digital artists. Do you have any?" And Sony just said, "Well, we're moving the studio. We don't want to have move and mid-production, so we got these guys on a hiatus." So I said, "Sure, I'll go." I don't know I've never been to New Zealand. Don't know this guy, but why not? Life's an adventure. Jump on board.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's watching right now, any sci-fi action movie you've seen in the last 30 some odd years, about half of those, one of these guys have worked on, and we've gone through their entire filmography, and we're just blown away by how many favorite movies that you guys had a hand on working on. Garrett, how about yourself? Let's start with you. Talk to us about what got you into the special effects sort of industry.
Yeah, I got my start a little later than the rest of the crew. But I grew up watching Lord of the Rings and Toy Story about 10 years apart. Just really fell in love with how visual effects and all the behind the scenes footage and stuff was able to bring these fantastical worlds to life, visually and stuff. And so that was just really appealing to me. I went to school in Texas, and I remember talking to some of my high school teachers about animation. I was doing little stick figure stuff. They pointed me to this school where I went and got my undergrad and grad school in like CG animation technology and a little bit of art.
What school was that?
That was Texas A&M.
Okay.
So they have a visualization lab that started somewhere in the mid 80s, I think, as a grad.
They've got a really nice program down there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Surprisingly enough, it's a small town. Bryan, College Station is mostly known for football, but one of the folks who started it, Fred Park, worked with Ed Catmull in Future World in like 1974 and did the first animated face in Hollywood. And then he moved to Texas and started teaching. So that was really cool.
Wow.
Then I was interviewing with DreamWorks at that time, and it was going okay, but it's a large place. It's a little bit slower. This other place in Dallas called me at Real Effects, see if I want to work on Book of Life as like my first movie and try that out while I was still doing my thesis until about 1 a.m. That's where I met Alan. It was like my mentor helping me with Houdini and teaching me stuff with that.
I kind of saved my pipeline, but quite a lot.
So I've spent the past 10 years at Real Effects and then DreamWorks and then Weta Digital. And then I got to work with Glenn Keane, who did Ariel and a bunch of other Disney characters like hand-drawn animation stuff. So we were scanning and registering paper, trying to get that on screen. So it's about 12-year career maybe, just building pipelines and stuff for animation and visual effects.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Anybody fall into the industry sort of by accident or surprise? You didn't really have this sort of motivation to get into drawing, but you sort of just fell into it. Jim, go ahead. Tell us first how that worked out.
Well, I'll tell you that I was a studio musician in Los Angeles. That's what I came to the West Coast for. So I was a woodwinds player, mostly saxophone, that people would hire me for doing whatever. And of course, some months that went very well, and other months not so well. And the landlords didn't care if it ever went well or not well; they just wanted their money. So there was a friend of mine that knew I was looking for, work and stuff. And she also knew that I was a 2D animator and an illustrator, which I'd done through high school and stuff. And she called me up one day. She was an editor on Kiss of the Spider Woman and over Warner Brothers. And she called me up and said, hey, there's a friend of mine that's moving from Dallas to Los Angeles, going to open up a studio. He wants, someone to work in computer graphics who's an illustrator and an animator. Are you interested? And I said, oh, that guy is me. So I saw it as an opportunity, jumped on board, just totally started buying every magazine I could find to read up about computer graphics, coding, what the hell's a pixel? I mean, all that stuff. And
Wow.
and just ate and drank computer graphics 24/7 for a couple of years. And I worked for this guy, and we would go to SIGGRAPH, and we would go to the National Computer Graphics Association con. I mean, all these things that were the big deal back then. And just to learn as much as I possibly could about stuff. And so that was 84, 85, 86. I got hired by a company to do computer graphics for industrials. And so we were doing all these industry internal films and stuff for people. And then I was doing a demo for a couple of guys from Filmation Studios. They ended up hiring me to go bring computer graphics to Filmation Studios, which was He-Man and She-Ra and all that stuff.
Very nice.
Ended up doing 65 episodes of Brave Star that some of you might have watched after school in the afternoons. Let's see. And then I got laid off in October of that year when the company was sold by Group W for parts. And let's see. I'm trying to remember what the sequence of events was. But anyway, I think a year later, I got a call from Disney and went to work to be in charge of computer graphics for Beauty and the Beast. And so I did that film with them, and then went to Metrolight. And then I got another opportunity to work for Digital Domain, and Cameron and Scott Ross hired me as director of digital production for Digital Domain. And that's where I started with that. And then 2.5, 3 years later, I was back at Disney doing a film called Dinosaur.
Hey,
Nice.
love that.
It was a surprise to me because it was just like out of left field. I had no idea this was coming to me. And like I said, an editor on Kiss of the Spider One gave me my opportunity of a lifetime. So there you go.
I love it. I'm glad it worked out. It seems like it worked out fairly well for you, Jim.
Oh yeah, not bad.
I'm gonna get to Scott, because I know, Scott, you raised your hand. But Jim, I have a question, and I'm also going to be kind of posing this question to all you gentlemen. If I might be wrong on this, but it does feel like every now and then there comes a project that really sort of evolves the industry, whether it's an animated project or whether it's a live action project. These films come along that really kind of push the boundaries. Jim, would you say Beauty and the Beast did that in a few ways? Because it seemed like a few new technologies had been utilized for that one in particular. Maybe more computer graphics were used in that animated project than any had been done before. Am I wrong about that?
Well, Disney had never done an animated background before, let alone a three-dimensional background. So they'd never done any sidewalks moving by or roads moving by hand-drawn, which people had done in TV shows for decades. But they'd never done anything like that. And so I was working at another company, which doesn't exist anymore, called, I have many of those, called the DeGraff Warman in West Hollywood. And basically all that I knew that I had learned at DeGraff Warman, we basically put into effect over at Disney. Where we were using the same set of tools. At the time, it was Alias Power Animator. They'd been using Wavefront for all their animation. We continued to use Wavefront for all the animation. We used Alias for building things, so we built the ballroom with that. And then I'd been using RenderMan since '87 and programming that, and so we used RenderMan for our rendering everything at that time. But yeah, it was all new. It was all new stuff for Disney. No one knew if it was going to work. There was a plan B, which we didn't know anything about, to completely do it by hand in case it looked horrible. But as it turned out, it looked pretty good, and there you go.
It's
Yeah,
that
I
ball-
still
that
remember
ballroom
that
scene.
shot.
What's that?
The computer animated shot where they started off with the chandelier
Yeah,
And they
that was
had
all. That was all Greg Griffith's fault. He was one of the animators working for me and the computer graphics group there, and I just gave him free reign. I said, "Here, here's a wavefront, low res view of what the ballroom's going to feel like and look like. Has all the proper dimensions. Just just go crazy with cameras. See what you can do. He showed me that shot like the second day he was working on stuff, and I said, "Oh my God, that's saved, right? You've got a version 1 of that or something. You're going to make a version 2 and go have some more fun, but you're not. Don't friggin' touch that thing." And it ended up in the movie. So that was. I just remember seeing it and we goes, "Wow!" So
yeah, it was one of the signature shots. I remember that from my childhood, seeing that. I was like, okay, wow, I'm gonna start doing this.
One of the few times I ever got to see something as a supervisor and go, "Yeah, that shot's done."
Nice.
I love it. I love it. Scott, you also raised your hand. You kind of fell into this industry. Didn't really expect it. What happened with you?
Well, computer graphics wasn't really a real career in the 80s. So it was one of these things that, hey, we can draw a line on a CRT and it's straight. And everybody, clapped, and, being able to do a little, teapot was a big step forward. And this was, mid 80s. And so I went to school as an aerospace engineer. And so my first job was to design, build, and fly a satellite. So I'm a rocket scientist by
You are. Wow.
Yeah.
training. So
No,
I work. What?
They would give him like no time at all to like reset someone's orbit. It's like, oh, that has to be done in the next hour. It's like, oh, holy crap.
Oh, no. It's even better than that.
Ugh.
It's one of these things. I was at this, can I say that? Black project? Black site. It was a radar site somewhere in the States, because this is before internet. So you couldn't log in anywhere.
Right.
And, they wouldn't allow it. So here I was in this station, and I was looking at the plots of XYZ rotation of the satellite. And that's how I learned how to fly a satellite, was, looking at these curves and going, oh, is it stable? Is it not stable? So I'm watching this, and it happens to go in a direction that's unstable. And I just said, oh, okay, so it rises out of the east. We have about 90 seconds, a minute and a half, before the satellite sets in the west. So I have 90 seconds to diagnose and then figure out how to fix it, send up the commands, or create the commands, then send them over to telemetry, so telemetry can send them up to the bird. So I had my boss over one shoulder and the client over the other shoulder. And yeah, that's how that was my job. So, when people say, oh my gosh, this is due in, 2 hours, I'm like, I got time. When you're flying,
that's what real pressure feels like.
Yeah. And people are like, running around without their heads. I'm like, yeah. Nobody's going to die. So,
Maybe.
you don't have a $1 million satellite that's going to smack into the earth. So,
I love it. I love it.
That's how I got started. But so I decided, okay, I kind of did this. What am I going to do next? And a friend of mine said, yeah, go talk to these guys over. They're doing weird shit with some computers and making film. I don't know what they're doing. Just go talk to them. So I talked to them, and they went, wait. You know computers? I said, yeah. And you know photography, because I was moonlighting as a band photographer in Hollywood.
Oh, nice.
So I was shooting out a lot of pictures all over. So I never went to art school. I'm totally self-taught with photography, and oh, well, that sucked and this works, so do more of what works.
Wow.
And so they said, wait, photography, computers, come over here, you're hired. And I went, all right.
That's awesome. I know
that's
you worked on I was gonna say I have a little story about Starship Troopers. I went to go see it opening night at the AMC River Center in San Antonio. It was me and my brother's about 15 years older than me. We went into the theater and there was only like 2 seats left. We sat in there. It was filled with frat guys. So we saw that movie. We walked out of it. We thought it was the greatest movie we'd ever seen because the reactions were so crazy. And I mean, going into it, I mean, it was Paul Verhoeven, and the commercials look cool with the arachnids, and I mean, Starship Troopers, and I mean, yeah, it's a classic now, but I'll never forget that experience. I guess back in 1997, it was incredible.
The pilot on that production was great. We were up on a roof at night and just blowing shit up. It was great because at the time, computer graphics can do reliable, good, explosions.
Mm.
So what we did was, we would go up and film a bunch of explosions and then composite those in using Wavefront. And Wavefront, Alias Wavefront is the precursor to Maya. So that's the history. So when like Jimbo's talking about all these programs, these are the precursors to the programs being used now.
Wow.
Which, I'm sure the ones used now are going to go away with the advent of whatever. And, we'll have to learn something new, but hey, that's why I'm still in it, because it never stays static.
Yeah, you're always having to learn something all the time. Yeah. I mean, I've just started using 3 new software programs. I'm trying to learn those as fast as I can because I know I want to use it on the next project I'm going to be on. So.
Oh, that's
I don't know
right.
if you guys were ever there, but when I was at Sony, at the corporate office, they had the 30-foot model of the Roger Young, like in the lobby.
That was in the lobby.
Yeah, it was like pretty awesome to just walk around that thing.
Yeah, I like going to work and then walking by that. It was just like this huge model. It was one of the last full models. One of the last movies using full models. So,
yeah, it's very cool to see.
We've got a lot of dogs barking.
Yeah, sorry. We've got a husky visiting on my 2 corgis, and it's not working out all that well.
So, what was the movie you were just talking about with the last movie that used models?
Oh, that was Starship Troopers.
Okay, Starship Troopers. Okay.
Yeah, and I worked on that. That was what, 97? That was the last production I worked at Sony ImageWorks.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
that was concurrent with Hollow Man. So no, that was after Hollow Man. It was and Contact. Oh, what was the other ones? Anyway, there was a whole bunch that I got to see, but it was just a lot of fun, going on set and seeing like the model shoot. The pyro shoot was exciting. And oh no, that was Die Hard. That was a water shoot. It was a quarter scale water dump. That was pretty intense. That was fun. I mean, back, we couldn't do water and fire sims very well in digital, so we always shot physically. But to composite water, oh my gosh. So I end up working on water in Life of Pi. So yeah.
It's incredible, man. That was a great movie. The effects were just perfect, I thought.
Oh, thanks. I got to go to India for that one.
Like to know, before we start kind of talking about the focus of the panel and how you gentlemen all got started into writing, are there any projects that have really stuck with you for one reason or another? I know you've all worked on iconic films over years or decades, but is there one in particular that either really challenged you or just moved you in a certain way because of the experience? Wilson, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think very early on in my career, talking about kind of getting started and how it is that we got started, I went and saw 2001: A Space Odyssey when I was like 8.5 years old in that neighborhood.
Gosh.
My dad took me down to the city, and after that, I got the book, called The Making of 2001. And I read that cover to cover, probably until I was, 12 years old, and went to film school, and immediately after graduating film school said, that's what I want to do. I want to get into special effects, and found out that Doug Trumbull, the visual effects supervisor for 2001, had set up shop in Western Massachusetts, which happens to be where I'm from.
Wow.
And so I literally called them up and said, can I come and just take a tour of the facility? And they said yes. I went up, I toured the facility. I talked to Doug. I talked to all of the models and miniature makers. And we were just getting into visual effects then. So we were doing computer graphic visualizations of things that would be built. So it was a very interesting time in terms of the transition for the industry. And they called me up afterwards and said, do you want a job? And so that was my first actual job. I worked on the Luxor project with Doug Trumbull. The reason that I mention that is because after he finished some projects, he did Back to the Future, The Ride in Western Massachusetts. He left several of the world's best visual effects artists in Western Massachusetts without work. And so they formed a company called Mass Illusions. And at that company, we did The Matrix, we did Starship Troopers, we did What Dreams May Come. We won the Academy Award 2 years in a row. So the one that kind of sticks in my mind, I got to work on the development of The Matrix. And so I helped develop Bullet Time. I actually was the stand-in for Neo. So I did the whole fall backwards over and over again.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was so. But the thing about that's really kind of pertinent to what it is that we're talking about here today is that movie was made as storyboards before it was ever shot. The storyboards for that movie were so good and so clean and so in-depth that what happened was they decided to consolidate the production. And so when the production moved down to Australia, I stayed behind to keep working with Doug Trumbull on a completely different project.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time that I saw the movie was in the theater. And what I saw was the world that they had built in those storyboards on the screen. And it was the most direct translation I have ever seen in my entire career.
It's amazing.
Of being able to visualize the entire movie. I mean, it was like Hitchcock, it was like make the movie on paper before you even shoot it. And that's exactly what they did. And that has stuck with me to this day.
I love hearing that.
It's incredible.
You also name dropped like a bunch of just massive movie hits that have just informed my life and fascination with cinema. What Dreams May Come is like an just all-time emotional favorite. And then you name drop Hitchcock, who's my favorite director of all time. Actually just saw The Birds on a big screen a few days ago. And magically it still holds up, even though it's animated birds on a screen. It's wild. I love hearing that.
I just didn't see The Matrix, but I saw an ad to watch The Matrix at Cosm.
Yeah,
and I know there's one in LA and there's one in Dallas too. But yeah, that's a whole experience. I would love to watch it in an environment like that.
You guys should come on up and we'll go watch it.
Okay. We'll be up there actually.
Pitched that idea to because I opened the Sphere. I opened the Sphere with Darren Aronofsky's postcard, and kind of so Cosm is like a mini Sphere kind of,
right?
And I was like, oh, that this would be really cool. So who knows? Maybe they'll take the same content that they have at Cosm for the Matrix and put it into the Sphere someday. That would be awesome.
Oh my god!
That would.
I don't think we could handle that, Wilson. Alan, let's go with you next. What's something it's really stuck with you, an experience or a movie that's just really sort of been a milestone for yourself?
Geez. Well, I don't have anything as cool as Wilson. But I'll tell you the funny, the sort of the background story. I think my first big feature credit was Titanic.
Oh man,
and
all right, yeah, and you say you don't have anything cool. Come on.
No, okay. Yeah. Let me back up. I was basically like a noob in visual effects, right? And so I got to work on that, And then, my first movie makes whatever, $1.5 billion. And I'm like, how am I going to follow that? So, so that was the tricky part. But the thing about that production that really stuck with me at the time was that, so, I mean, if you were following the story at the time, it was like it was called James Cameron's Folly, right? It was like,
yes, doom and gloom,
tank everything, and the whole of DD was kind of like, oh no, it's all gonna go to crap and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember very clearly.
Yeah, there were a lot of late night meetings and all this stuff, but I think like the biggest thing was so they rushed to put together a trailer for Show West for, the exhibitors, right? And then when they got the trailer done, they screened it in the screening room for us. And back then it wasn't like James Horner music, it was Enya. So if you can imagine the trailer with Enya, right? Nice. That was the first time that like I saw that and I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be a hit. I mean, I didn't know how big of a hit it was gonna be, but it was like, it went from, oh, I'm working on a crappy project to boom, all of a sudden it's like really cool. So I think that's sort of the thing that sort of stuck with me the longest. There are a couple of others I think Wilson worked on with me at ImageWorks. Like more technical stuff like Polar Express and Beowulf, where Zemeckis was experimenting with motion and facial capture and stuff like that. So those are more of the technical stuff. Like those are the kind of big things that sort of hang in my head, I guess.
I gotcha. For the other three gentlemen, anything sort of stick out for you guys like it did for either Alan or Wilson?
The big one for me was a role I had that was very different from everything else I'd done. And I ended up programming for 9 months for 2012 because they had this problem, where they were going to be breaking everything. And when you break apart a model in CG, you don't see the model anymore. You see white, the interior of the model, which has no texturing and no anything on it. So they came to me and said, can you create volumetric textures for the internal textures of everything that we're going to break? And I'm like, okay, I think so. Yeah. And so I had to, I basically call it my Home Depot, selection of materials that I had to create, because it was, everything from concrete to bricks to asphalt to what's underneath the earth inside of Los Angeles.
Oh, man.
So anything that had to break apart, I had to make a shader for that would describe it in 3 dimensions. And so did that. They ended up changing the pipeline twice. I had to do it 3 times with different code. So that was kind of a pain in the butt. But it was, I tell you, it was one of those times where you're just in such deep concentration for a long period of time, trying to get something to work. And you'd hit those moments when it would finally got, fuck, that's never been done. Oops, sorry. Anyway,
don't worry about it.
Anyway, so yeah, you just bleep it. But anyway, so I would just stand up in my chair and sort of give myself a, wah, and then get back to work, But
Nice.
that was pretty exciting, actually. And actually, it actually did pay off during the production. I remember there was stuff I didn't know was going on. There were like a producer and somebody else is going, what is this guy doing? I mean, he's just like sitting at his desk all day, typing away and stuff. And it says, why do we even have him on our crew and blah, blah, blah. And my supervisor comes up to me one day and says, hey, make the airport with none of your textures on it. I'm like going, what? Why? And he says, just do it. You put the textures in there that you were given, and that's it. And just render the scene. I'm like, okay. And so I did that, and then they took the latest version that I'd been working on and did them back to back in the theater in front of everybody. I didn't know about any of this. I was just sitting there working away. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, after dailies that day, about 10 people came up to me and says, thank you so much for the work you're doing. This is so nice. I mean, it's amazing what's happening on the screen. I'm like, oh, okay. And then that person would walk away, and then another one would come up, and I just felt like I finally went out to my soup, and I went, what's going on? What happened? And he told me the story. So anyway, it was basically something he did for me to keep me from getting fired, probably, because they didn't understand what I was doing and the effect I was having on things. So anyway, so that was very different for me. Normally I'm animating and building and lighting and doing effects and stuff like that, but or supervising a department or something. But this one was just me in a corner, like, trying to get things to compile. So
I love hearing that. Giving you the respect you deserve and you've earned over the years and for all your hard work. More supervisors and more people in the industry should do that. It's something we try to do by also having people behind the camera and people on the crew like yourselves do, is we have these conversations with folks, special effects artists, stunt doubles. We've had a lot of different people on the show to talk to, because these are the unsung heroes of the films. You know what I mean? So yeah, the long nights for the stunt people, the broken bones, you don't hear about those things. So yeah, we appreciate you all, and yeah, the unsung heroes of the movie industry. Scott or Garrett, do you guys have a story you'd like to share? Another one?
Well, I think one of the first films, well, Starship Troopers was fun in that, being able to go out on set, see everything. It's like you go to like the pyro shoot and it's like, piff. And I'm like, that's it? And they said, oh yeah, well, we overcranked the camera. So when I finally saw it in dailies, I went, oh, so it goes very slowly, so it looks very large. And I was kind of learning sort of the language of like, oh, okay, so that works. And even on productions like Life of Pi, and just organizing large teams to like, okay, what are we going to do to have the audience concentrate on the tiger in the boat instead of all this water that we have to recreate or create from nothing.
Yeah.
And so that the audience is looking at the tiger and not the background. So I like working on stuff that people are like, well, that wasn't an effect. And I say, good, I've done my job. You're not supposed to notice all that stuff. It's all that stuff that you just go, well, yeah, of course it's, 1920s New York. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly was.
Sure it is.
we time traveled and we did that. So yeah.
What an easy concept, but it takes a lot of work to make that happen. So yeah, I love hearing that.
It's one of those things where you just work really hard to be not noticed.
Yeah. I remember, what was it, Cinefex, after we finished Interview with the Vampire, and these guys showed up to interview us and said, well, we're going to put you in like a 10-page slot, somewhere near the back of the book. And we're like going, oh, really? This is, well, here, look at our reel. And we showed them all this stuff they didn't realize was an effect. And so the title of the article in Cinefex ended up being Invisible Visual Effects.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's one of the things I would specialize in is learning how not to be seen. Big dinosaurs, nah. Everybody knows that's an effect. But it's the subtle stuff that people are like, oh yeah, that's just normal.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. Garrett, how about yourself?
Yeah. My first movie, Book of Life, was exciting. Just first movie, right? Hanging out with a bunch of cool people. And the director was so nice and thankful for everybody who's working on the movie. And I got to talk with folks that have worked on Hollow Man and other kind of movies like that. And just kind of moving me into, I learned so much in that first. Everyone says you learn more in your first 6 months than I would in college. And even though it was 7 years of college, I think that was still right. The first 6 months was just like go, 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 which was awesome. But the biggest moment probably for me would have been my trip to Weta down in Wellington. So I did about a year there in 2018 on Alita Battle Angel and Mortal Engines. So we were taking the Maya pipeline from Lord of the Rings days and bringing it into Katana, so we could do more complex things like Mortal Engines, cities eating cities, all this like complex motion and the rendering and some of the scenes that I had to try to debug to like get the renders actually out. We're hitting about 280 gigs of RAM, I think. We had to throw them on the effects cluster to even like get the stuff out the door. But right, Lord of the Rings being something that brought me in the industry, it was awesome to be just down there and living in the whole area and taking trips on the weekends. Then also career-wise, I was doing like probably the hardest programming work I've done in my career. Like it was very engineering focused, and like 2 milliseconds makes a whole the difference because you're doing it across a million things across a city and stuff like that. But at the same time, we were going out and freediving on our lunch break, and my cube mates were Kiwis. So they would like spear something and gut it and stick it in the fridge to take home for dinner. And it was just like this interesting dichotomy of like the analog all around me and the beautiful green and blue, because in LA everything's just brown. But then like jumping in the computer and doing something like really, really technical for a couple hours here and there, and like getting both of those in the same day.
Wow.
Really awesome.
Yeah, Wellington is beautiful. I was down there on King Kong for a year. So, yeah, really, really cool place.
Highly recommend, yeah.
I love it. I love it. So you gentlemen are all a part of this very unique panel where you all have been in the industry, special effects, doing work on films and projects for many, many years, but you've all taken this drastic sort of turn in your lives where you decided to come out and either write a novel or a short story or a book. And you guys probably all have different reasons for that. So kind of want to hear about, maybe has this always been sort of a motivation you've always had, or is this, again, some of you fell into special effects work in movies? Is this something that you just kind of fell into? Who wants to start off?
I don't think you can fall into novel writing. I think that would be
50,000 words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I kind of, I actually, when I was in college, I studied writing as well. And I was kind of trying to determine what path I was going to take. And there was a period of time there where I thought I might get into writing. And throughout the course of my career, I've written scripts. And so I've always had my hand in that kind of world. I was the editor of the college newspaper. And so I've always had my hand in writing a little bit. But really around 2019, I think it was, I kind of decided that I wanted to actually give it the old college try and see if I could actually write a novel. And then I very quickly realized that I didn't really know how to write a novel, that there actually is a tremendous amount of skill involved in sitting down and crafting a story. And so I sat down and I started just inhaling all the books and all the online courses and all the master classes from all the different, authors that were out there, learning as much as I could. And I wrote my first book, which was a time travel book called Meet Me Here Yesterday. And I knew that that book would never see the light of day, because I knew that that book was meant for me to be able to learn how to write a novel. And so that was kind of like my first step. That was around 2019 and 2020. And then, gosh, what happened right around then? There was a little thing that called the pandemic. And so I had already been like, oh, well, I'm totally primed for this. Like, the way that I structure my day is I get up extra early in the morning and I spend a certain amount of time every day writing first thing, just to that's my practice every single day, no matter where I am, what I'm doing. I get up early and I write. And so the pandemic really helped me to kind of accelerate my ability to write my next novel, which is The Murder Algorithm, which is the one that's out now. And now I'm hooked. Like I can't not do it. It's a world that, to some degree, when you're in the filmmaking business, everybody has input into what you do. Even if you're a supervisor, you've still got a supervisor above you, and they've got a director above them, and they've got a studio above them, and they've got the audience above them. So there's all of this input that goes into making a movie. When it comes to writing a novel, and creating your own world, that's really your opportunity to kind of say, I get to do this. I get to play with this. I get to make this a thing that is, is my own. And that's kind of like, that's how I got into it.
Yeah,
I love that.
I would say the same thing, because I wrote both of these, and I always kind of dabbled with writing, even in high school, short stories and stuff. And then, I was working on about a dozen movies, and one day I was in the it was the third floor of the TriStar building, and we found this room full of scripts, and so we said, "Oh, I wonder what these are like." And we pulled one off and opened it up, and it just read the first page, or the first 3 pages, and just went, "Oh my gosh, they actually paid money for this." And so I thought, well, shoot, I could do better than that. And so in my copious free time, I just started, writing every night. I'm not a morning person. I do everything at night. So I started writing, and about 10 years later, after writing a novel, throwing it out about 8 or 12 times, I finally got and finished. Well, I would finish about a dozen times, and I would throw it out 11 times and start with a blank page. So
Wow.
that's how I taught myself writing, was just, and then go to a writing group and just say what works, what doesn't work. And not just, oh, it sucks, or, oh, it's great. I need to know concrete feedback. So that's what I did. I just kept working at it until it became a cohesive whole. And now I'm writing the 3rd book of this series. And I've got 2 other books in rough draft form. So it's like I'm trying to juggle now 3 projects all at once. And work on visual effects.
Wow.
No, I don't like to sleep. No. You need
What is that? Who does that?
None of
felt
it.
like it, though. I mean, I wasn't actually planning on writing that. Sort of like Wilson, I've done that stuff in the past. Write screenplays and shoot indie films and features. But I was happily doing other stuff. I made a so at the height of the 3D, virtual world kind of thing, I wanted to take Mars data from the satellites and see what I could do with them. So essentially, I took them and put them into Unreal Engine and essentially built a driving simulator out of it. That's on Steam. And then I got some press for that. There were like a bunch of guys that, did interviews with me and stuff like that. A year later, one of those guys comes back, just emails me out of the blue and says, "Hey, I don't know if you're up for it, but I'd love to, work on a book with you." And so I was like, "Well, I've never done that before." Okay. So we literally started the book together. Spent about, 2 or 3 years on that stuff. Life happened and he had to step away from the book. So the story is credited to both of us, but then I essentially took that and finished it essentially. So yeah, I fell into it.
Wow. It's remarkable. And he reached out to you with no understanding or inkling if you were a writer whatsoever.
Well, he kind of knew I was like, I was into writing and stuff because we talked about it at the interview. I'm a big space nerd essentially, like SpaceX, all that stuff. So it was sort of like, it is a sci-fi story. So he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll just ask Alan." So,
Could you tell us a little bit of what your book's about, Alan?
it's a mining asteroid accident. So basically, it's like the first asteroid that they're bringing back to try and mine. And of course, something bad happens, right? And so the only guy that can try and solve the issue is essentially a washed up ex-astronaut. You know, the usual stuff.
Yeah, I went from flying satellites to writing fantasy. Summoning a Lost Fae is basically a story about how a fellow finds a forest fae on his back porch, and then it's trying to help her, but then all sorts of chaos ensues with murders and counterfeit money. And what he doesn't realize is that his teenage son actually participated in a summoning that went horribly, horribly wrong.
Wow.
So yeah,
Love
I'm
hearing that.
going the opposite. I'm not doing any sci-fi stuff. I'm doing
I'm into all of it.
Water simulations are way too much.
yeah. I just water flames. I was just like, all right, I'm done with that.
Jim, how about you? How did you get into the writing? Where did that turn come from?
Well, 1987, October, every computer graphics company in the world, except for Pacific Data Images, went bankrupt.
Mm.
The ones that were the big ones, Omnibus in Europe in Canada, both big production companies, including Bob Abel's down in Hollywood. Let's see, Toyo Lynx in Japan, they all went. And I was working at computer graphics and thought to myself for a little bit this, hey, this is kind of a flaky business. You know, it seems like people find really good excuses for, you know, falling down. But, and I was trying to figure out what to do. Well, I had a buddy of mine who was a writer, and he lived in Kansas City, and I had done all this really wonderful stuff, won a bunch of awards for his writing, and was writing for the local newspaper there in Kansas City. And I called him up and said, hey, you know, I've got some ideas for some screenplays and, you know, movies we could make. And I'll tell you what, I'll give you half my salary that I'm making here in Hollywood if you'll work with me on getting these screenplays written. And so that's really how I kind of started devoting time to it. And I had 3 ideas. I outlined them to him, and he would do a first pass on things, and I would do a second pass, and we'd ping it back and forth until the screenplay got finished. And then we found an agent, and we started having them pitched, and a few things almost went in the early days of that. Tom Hanks chose Joe versus the Volcano over one of ours. So anyway, I kept doing screenwriting. I did the 4th one by myself. And that 4th one ended up almost being a Billy Bob Thornton film funded by a bunch of guys in Germany until we had 9/11. And then they said, well, you know, you've got an atomic blast on an Air Force base on page 9, so we can't have these kind of things on the theater just now. And so that all went flat. But anyway, I ended up writing about 17 screenplays. And then I was getting a bunch of work, and I needed to do something to keep my mind off of all the digital stuff when I went home. So I took out my old Illustrator hat and started doing an online cartoon called Wireheads. And it was about people who work in a visual effects company in South Santa Monica and just all of the hijinks that happen at work. And so I did that for 4 years. And every year I would put a collection out of the comics into a book. And had started in 2006 with the first book, and I was selling it at Comic-Con and as an exhibitor. And this year is my 20th year as an exhibitor. And I stopped doing Wireheads, but I started doing Zombie Bunnies, which was a spin-off of Wireheads about these little bunnies that were sort of the gremlins of World War II, you know, that would get into your machinery and screw things up. Same idea, except it was all digital, and it was the zombie bunnies coming through a portal into our world. And, you know, I basically wrote it as a middle grade, like junior high school thing that kids of that age would enjoy, because I was writing for like the 8-year-old, 9-year-old version of myself. And then over the past year, 2 years, I've been started doing another comic, which is a detective noir sci-fi set in San Francisco, and called Horace Gumshoe. And we just put out the 2nd episode this year. But then about 2019, like Wilson, I started thinking that, maybe I should try to write a novel. And so I joined an online group called Pitch to Published, and I've been working with them on things, and I've done 4 novels now, one which is a duology of the first story, and now I've got the 4th one I've begun outlining, which started out as this piece of paper, with a little quick outline of like an idea I had. And I thought it was going to be a short story, but it may end up being a novel itself. So I'm not sure about that. I have another novel that I could write. So I may write this as a short story and then write the novel after that. I do it a little differently than Wilson. I don't write every day. I certainly think about things every day, but I don't write about them every day or actually get on a keyboard to write a story.
Gotcha.
But I do take November. And November 1st, I set aside about an hour to 2.5 hours a day, getting my 1,667 words done each day. And that goes from then until December 20th, where I have 100,000 words finished. And so that's what I do that time of year. And I do get my first words, my first version of the novel done. I set it aside for about a month, and then I start doing rewrites and getting other people to read it and getting notes back from them. And I send it off to my editor and get note back from her. And then I spend probably the next 5-6 months getting it rewritten. And then I have to work on the layout of my 3rd episode of Horace Gumshoe, which is due the middle of October. And so that's my year, basically, is what happened. So that's what I do now. That's how I became a writer and why I became a writer. And it's a lot of mileage, but I think I've gotten about 1 million words written over the last couple of years now, according to things that are keeping stats on me. So
that is a fascinating process that you developed. Did that just kind of occur by happenstance, or was that like a plan that you heard about?
It was a method that I'd heard of that other people do for writing 50,000 words in the month of November. What's that called? What's the thing that everyone does called? NaNoWriMo. That's right. Yeah. So I've participated in NaNoWriMo. It's the National Novel Writing.
I forget what it stands for.
Right. And so I've done that every year now, and I keep doing it, but I've extended it into December because I need 70 days to get my 100,000 words. So I'm sorry, is that right? No, I need 50 days to get my 100,000 words. So
Gotcha.
That's what I've been doing every year.
Gotcha. That's fascinating. I've never heard of that before. And now I think anybody who watches this who's an aspiring writer might look into that and give it a shot. Even David may be included in doing that as well. We'll see what happens. Garrett, how about yourself? Where did this writing turn come from for you?
Yeah, so I think similar to Wilson, also looking back, I can see how I was writing in high school. And my first screenplay was 2 kids that build a rocket to go to the moon, and it's like guarded by aliens. I think I watched some documentary on TV about how we never went to the moon, and my teenage brain was like, well, I could write a story about like why we never went to the moon, because there's like giant aliens that are gonna like eat all the spaceships and stuff.
Makes sense.
I think we lost that file, unfortunately, but I'm sure it would have won an Oscar if I'd finished it. But as I got into animation, it was like keeping track of what I thought would be like pitches for short animations and stuff. Then I got really big into D&D, and I was doing my character sheets, and just realized that the backstory started like running off the page, and I was running out of room for backstory. And I was like, oh, well, I can't. Within the rules of D&D, it's hard to like make this one character thing happen or whatever. So I started playing more and more with that, and then reading a bunch of collections of short stories like the Silmarillion. There's a Gothic horror short story that I bought that had a flaming skeleton on the front of it. I was like, this needs to be on my bookshelf. And a bunch of old sci-fi from like the 60s and stuff, Alfred Bester and some other, it's kind of interesting 10 to 20 page stories. And I started like kind of expanding them into that. And as I was talking to my buddy that he does like really cool spray paint art everywhere. So you can like do a gradient between 2 colors of spray paint, which breaks my brain. And you can like make it a really nice blend, and does all kinds of really cool art
wow.
On Instagram. And he ended up doing my cover, but with him being the artist and me being the technical, I was like, how do you help me figure out, like, there's the novel and the character arcs and all this stuff that feels overwhelming. And I've got all these little ideas. And he's like, well, if it's art, like, you can just experiment, and your art piece could be the question for me, you know, for him. It could be like, what if I just make a giant orange canvas and like put some stuff on? Like, that could be an art piece. Not everyone's gonna like it, but if you want to do that, like, you could do that kind of thing. So it gave me the confidence to be like, oh, well, how much can I world build in a fantasy setting in like 10 pages or like 15 pages? You know, because the 700-page novels, I got a bunch on my bookshelf and I love them. But like, there's something interesting about trying to like be kind of pithy and concise with your world building, and like how entertaining can you be in like a genre that's normally really big books. So that was interesting. And I found myself splitting my stories between like the medieval fantasy, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones kind of stuff. And then I had some kind of like present day, and then I had some like kind of sci-fi ones. And I was like, oh, maybe I can shove these together with the concept of like past, present, and future, and kind of make it this not time travel, but since there's gods in the past, like maybe those gods can exist in the present and the future, and there'll be like a through line between it and the universe. It's not necessarily like story connections, but similar kind of universe. And I was like, oh, maybe I can make this kind of thing happen. I really love the Silmarillion, like not necessarily the story, but like the idea of this like gigantic, you know, the gods fighting the Balrogs and all kinds of stuff, like the first stage of Tolkiendom, right? Which is the Lord of the Rings is amazing, but there's just something more brutal and metal about the first stage. It was really cool, so I wanted to try to explore that a little bit more. But not to harp too much on religious, but with myself not being as religious, I was like, maybe life doesn't have the conductor and the Ainulindale, which is Tolkien's like metaphor of creation, with the song, which is really beautiful imagery. But I was like, that's not for me. And I just Googled antonym of symphony, and came up with cacophony, and I was like, oh, that feels like the right word for the world around me. It's just these loud, especially Los Angeles, right? It's just a loud place to exist. But if you listen long enough, you can kind of like pull apart the different pieces and almost look at it like it's an orchestra of like car noises and keys jingling across the street and people talking on speakerphone and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just love alliteration, so I was like, cool, it's going to be cacophony of something that starts with a C. And I was like, oh, I've got a bunch of power, right? My stories all kind of focus on power for commoners or monarchs or gods, like, and even just commoners have a lot of power even among each other or like amongst their families and things like that. And the crown's just a great symbol for power, I thought. So cacophony crown just kind of popped in my head, and I was like, that's going to be it. So I can do a bunch of short stories across genres, and the through line is like power and magic that goes through the whole thing. So I was like, let's do it. Let's see what happens. Yeah, been keeping up with that. And then I've got kind of a 90-degree turn. I'm trying more of an autobiographical fiction. It's like a contemporary fiction piece.
Okay.
Because my brain can't stay focused on something long enough. So when I went on my honeymoon, which was amazing, in Italy, my brain was like, ooh, what if it was like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but in Rome with like, you know, something else. Like, just trying something out, letting myself write that. And then, of course, more of the short stories. And some of them feel like they could be novels, so trying that out, or just brand new stories and stuff too.
I love it. I appreciate it. Which part of Italy was this in that inspired you?
Oh, so Rome, and right. So my college career, my first 2 years were architecture before visualization had a undergrad department. It was only grad school. So it was a lot of art and architecture history, which got really drilled into me, and then the Renaissance, and had to do a lot of Renaissance history in high school randomly too. So Rome, Florence, those were on the honeymoon trip. Then we did a couple days in Sorrento too, just out by the beach and relaxing, and it's gorgeous. Lots of lemon.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I love Italy. It's beautiful. Capri is, I feel like, the most beautiful place on earth, only because I haven't been to New Zealand yet. So once I take a visit or trip over there, it's probably gonna blow that out of the water. But just looked like a postcard from another beautiful planet when I visited the last time. So yeah, no, I get that completely. Well, gentlemen, you guys are all a part of this extremely unique panel. You have achieved so much in your careers. I'm wondering if there's anything else that you kind of wanted to share for anyone who might be aspiring to write or who doesn't know how to kind of take those first steps. And you've already given some very helpful hints or tips on you guys and how you got started. But is there anything else that you really needed to overcome, either internally or something externally in order to really pursue writing and turn it into something either achievable or a goal that you wanted to surpass? Jim.
I thought, many years ago, I met some writers when I was going to university. And I, after meeting with them, I was so like completely blown away by the kind of things they were talking about and what they'd done that I thought to myself, oh my God, I could never do that, And so I would say, first of all, don't believe that, there are things you can do. There are things that that maybe you don't even know, And what people, of course, say all the time about writing is they say, write what you know. Now, sometimes a lot of people would say, well, no one's going to want to know about me working in an accounting office. And, but the truth is that you can take something like that and the knowledge you have in that field and expand it into a story because, what was the one with Barbara Streisand, Double Indemnity, for example, was basically you had to know a little bit about insurance jargon to really get the story. But that's a great old film and a wonderful story. And it really hasn't been achieved by anyone else as far as that kind of a story happening.
Wow.
But I think you have to be careful about those words, write what you know. What I have a lot of experience in was waiting for something to happen on the screen where pixels would pop up and I could finally make a judgment on whether I'd made the right value change or not. And sometimes it would just be like something that was 16 by 16. I'm just waiting for it, and it would pop up, and I go, nope, next, nope, it has to be less, nope. And so I'm working in this like virtual world of what's happening in my mind that I know I've set this value, but I'm looking at the visual and going, nope, it's telling me it's wrong. Okay, great. And so I did that for decades, and so I ended up writing my first sci-fi all about someone who is living in a virtual world inside their mind. So, yeah, because I felt like I'd done that already. That's what I knew.
It sounds like there might be something cathartic about that sort of subject matter for yourself.
Could be.
No,
Yeah, I think part of the write what you know is, Alan doesn't know what it's like to mine an asteroid, right? But we write when we say we write what we know, it's really we write what we know we have felt, because it's always about characters, and stories are always about living a life through another character. And I think that is kind of where that adage comes true, is just in imbuing something of yourself into the characters and environments and places that you take people in your books. The advice that I would have is just, look, everybody writes a little bit differently, as evidenced by all of the different ways that we all kind of approach it, right? Some people absorb a lot of information about writing. Other people just start doing it by the seat of their pants. And the truth is that the one common denominator for everybody is just do it. Just start doing it. Don't be scared to start doing it and sharing it with other people and finding out what it is that you can improve, because the ability to be able to take criticism is something that you really have to have as a writer. And because it's really helping you, it's helping you to tell a better story. And that really, I think, is what it's all about for all of us, is it's all about telling a better story.
I've been to an asteroid, actually. I've mined an asteroid.
But you did? Oh, yeah. I made the assumption. I probably shouldn't have made that assumption.
Well, no, actually, I visualized it. I made a little Unreal previs so that me and Luke could actually like wander through the ship in the book and stuff. So,
wow,
wow,
it could be,
yeah. I would just say, like Wilson was talking about, is to just write. And one of the things which is kind of counterintuitive is I usually write longhand in a notebook, because if I start at a computer, I get distracted. I start going like, oh, my email, or oh, I want to check this or that out, or so on and so forth. And before I know it, hours have passed. I'm like, oh. So if I just start with a blank page and a pen and just start writing, that is what you need to do, is just start writing, and then find people with, who can give you reasonable feedback as to what works for them and what doesn't work for them. So, and no, it has to be, other writers, preferably. And there's a great group, the Greater Los Angeles Writers Society, GLAS, and part of their thing is they have critique groups. So if you write science fiction fantasy, they have a critique group for that. If you write memoir, they have a critique group for that. Mystery, screenplays, any kind, whatever genre that you're writing in or literature, they have a critique group of like-minded people who read and write that, so they can say, oh yeah, this trope's been done to death. Maybe you should, do something else, and feedback like that. So yeah, a writing group I find really, really helpful. And it also sets deadlines. So it's like, oh, I've got to write a chapter for my writing group, and yeah, it's due.
Hey, that's very true. That's very true. Keeps you honest, keeps you on schedule. I love that.
Yeah.
I guess I'd have to say, along the same line, I really like the Stephen King quote from his book, just read a lot and write a lot. And that's just whenever because I logic all day long in programming, I'm trying to if I write this right then, I'm like, no, read a lot, write a lot. That's all it is. Are you reading or are you writing? Because you're not doing one of those two things. You're off topic. And you can go rest and do that kind of stuff. But if I'm trying to be a writer is just somebody who writes, right? So getting rid of the requirements or how you feel like you need to be doing something, just figure out what works for you and just kind of go for it and have fun with it, right? Because that's kind of the whole point. And
it should be, yeah.
Yeah, it should be, right? And the fear of the vulnerability, especially for somebody who's been on the shallow end of the creative part of the industry for so long, the fear of putting yourself out there. It's definitely worth overcoming for the awesomeness and the joy of people congratulating you and reading your book and oh, I really like the story. Let's talk more about it. It's totally worth it.
That's actually interesting. A sort of corollary to the thing about write what you know is actually write what you love, I think. And if you don't know about it, yeah, you can go do some research about it. But if you are writing something that you would like to read, right? I think that's the thing that would sort of keep you writing is, write the stuff that you want to read. And I mean, I don't know if people like my books, right? But I enjoy it. So, by extension, there's probably at least two people that like it, right? So, I just write it because I would enjoy reading it, I think. So, yeah, what you love.
I like that. I would agree with that.
Yep.
And I would agree with the reading thing too, because I think that, that is a lot of, I've read so much science fiction in my life, and I think that it has helped inform a lot of my writing, being able to kind of pull from Philip K. Dick and pull from, Heinlein and all of these different influences that are floating around to be able to kind of have that, in your brain, I think helps to be able to form new worlds.
I like the idea of when you're in a writing group, you're not only putting stuff out there for others to read and critique, you're taking their stuff, reading their stuff, and critiquing that. And you're on the other end of it. So it's this give and take. So you go, oh, yeah, I do the same thing. So, oh my gosh, this thing that, I see in myself, I see in this other writer. And, so I think that's really helpful. So if you read other people's work and you critique it and you go back and forth, so that way you have an idea. And I find that very helpful.
Yeah, it sounds like you're accomplishing multiple things at once. you're sort of overcoming maybe any self-doubt you might have by allowing yourself to share what's very personal to you with others, but you're also growing as a writer. You're learning. You're, like you mentioned, being informed by other material, by either your peers or by other books that you're reading. It's sort of almost like a cheat code, it sounds like, to really get to where you want to get to at a faster pace. I think all of those items are extremely helpful for anybody who's trying to get into writing or who might be stuck trying to get into writing. We have a few individuals on our team who are writers, and they have their own sort of horror stories on how difficult it is to either stay on task or to try and get ideas to the next place in a sort of natural sort of state. And so, yeah, I think all these things could be very helpful. I appreciate you sharing all of those things.
Cool.
Dave, do you have anything?
I love this podcast. I love talking to all you guys and getting all your life experiences out there. And you guys have worked on some of like the most beloved films that we've ever seen on screen, and it's an incredible thing to me to talk to you guys, and the fact that you guys are writing as well and creating. I grew up kind of wanting to do what you guys did in like visual effects, and then I kind of strayed off that path, and I do have some ideas to start writing some stuff, and just talking to you guys gives me a lot of motivation to actually finally start. I got one really big grand idea that I've been kicking around for a while that constantly kind of changes and morphs with the times, because it's really based in a lot of reality and what's happening in the news. But yeah, I mean, you guys are all awesome. But before we go, I have to ask. I have a favorite movie of all time. It's my list constantly changes, but most of the time, this is the most favorite movie I have. It's The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. I know Alan Chan has worked on it. Can you give me like one story before we go?
Oh gosh, I'm PJ approved. It's the first thing I can think of. So I guess when your shot gets approved, there's a little thing with the little stamp they put on it. It says PJ approved.
I've seen the stamp.
Yeah. So I don't know that I could tell you that much about it. I worked on it through Sony because it was basically a 911 project, and they had I think 200 comp shots that needed to go out. So we basically took some of that work. So I wasn't like at Weta for that sort of stuff. I was basically, just handling a lot of composite work. My supervisor came to me and he said, "Hey, you like Liv Tyler, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Here, I'm going to give you this shot of her and Aragorn kissing. It's like 1,200 frames or something like that." So yeah, that was a little painful. So.
Wow.
You got up close and personal.
Yeah.
So yeah, is it the shot where they're like on the bridge in Rivendell?
Yeah, you know that shot. Okay, yeah.
So I guess every time I see that shot,
there's like trees and stuff in the back. I had to pull a key off of all the stuff in the back. It's crazy.
Wow.
There's a lot of roto involved. So yeah.
I went to that spot where they actually filmed some of it, and there's a big sign up that says Rivendell is CG, but the tree over here was a lot shorter 20 years ago, and so what was in the corner of the shot? Y'all know how much.
Yeah,
like 95% of that shot. But it's really funny that there's like a place in real life.
Yeah, there are places in Wellington that you can wander around, and my friend would just say, "Oh yeah, this is where they shot the this scene for the Fellowship," and I was just like, "Oh yeah, I recognize that."
Well, I didn't get to work on Lord of the Rings. A lot of friends did, but I finally did get to work on the Rings of Power about a year and a half ago. So that was a blast.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Well, gentlemen, the panel is called World Builders, Visual Effects Meets Speculative Fiction. You can find it this Thursday, the 24th, from 1:30 to 2:30 in room 29 CD at the San Diego Convention Center. You're looking at all the panelists, and it's going to be moderated by Teresa Halverson. Gentlemen,
Yep.
this has been an absolute honor. I feel like we've not only learned so much, but there's so much great advice and so many things to learn from. Whether you think so or not, your stories are going to help someone out there either find their passion or get to the next stage in their life and something that they want to do creatively. You already have one individual right here who I think you helped push a little bit. So you've already accomplished something here today by talking with us. We want to thank you all. We want to wish you the absolute best time at San Diego Comic-Con, the center of the geek universe, as I call it, the happiest place on earth. This has been an absolute joy, and want to thank you all again for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you so much.
Well,
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
yeah, it's been a blast.
Absolutely. And we will see the rest of you guys at San Diego. Stay tuned for our coverage from the Center of the Geek Universe all this week. We have more interviews, more panel coverage, and we're going to be taking a look at a lot of the activations. So stick around. Be sure to like, follow, all that good stuff, and we will see you soon. Peace.